Thank you, Shannon. A very, very important part of our day. Perhaps unsurprisingly, from those that know me as a charity regulation nerd, I have actually attended all the ACNC Regulator days. It still feels a bit surprising to be here as the Commissioner, but I'm certainly very excited to be in the role, and perhaps even more so now that I'm 6 months in, which probably means I can't any longer say, sorry, I'm new. But the question perhaps everyone in this room might want to ask is, why is the ACNC what we do of national significance in July 2023? And why is the significance of our role growing? Well, because our data shows that registered charities hold assets of more than $422 billion. The total annual revenue is $190 billion. Charities receive more than $13 billion in donations and bequests from the public. They are supported by more than 3.2 million volunteers, and they employ 1 in 10 people. These are very big numbers, but it's important too. It's a lot of people. And perhaps most importantly, it's a big impact. And if these numbers keep increasing in the way that our data shows that they have been, let alone climb more rapidly in light of anything the government's target of achieving doubling giving by 2030 facilitates, then our role as Australia's only specialist charity regulator, as a public trust and confidence regulator, is even more important. And that's why every single member of the ACNC staff runs to their desk every morning. And it's why I'm so enthusiastic to be able to say I'm a regulator, which I never thought I would feel so proud to say. So if you will just indulge me for a very short moment, I'd just like to cover some of the things that have been my focus in the last 6 months. First of all, we've been working hard to do our core work better. And this has involved the advice services team, for example, handling 2 peak periods and managing that in a way that they're very, very close to their high performance standards. And that's been a big improvement on the previous year. In the first 6 months, we have registered 1,354 charities, and that's been an extremely busy time. That in those 6 months, in the last 3 months actually, the numbers have gone up so much that it's represented what we would normally register in 5 to 6 months. So that's a big amount of work. We've been doing our compliance work, and while everyone in this room will understand why I can't discuss our investigation work, I've been really impressed by the maturity of the compliance work since where it was at when I first started. It's very much risk-driven, and those risks help us determine our priorities, and also we share back that knowledge to the sector in things like our compliance reports. Secondly, we've worked to strengthen our organisational structure and our operations. Now, internal things, rightly, are not things that you need to worry about, but they do underpin all our work. And one thing you will have noticed today is you've already been introduced by Tash, who's Acting General Counsel, and I'd also like to mention Nadine Claude, who's here as the Acting Assistant Commissioner. So there are now 2 Assistant Commissioners, and there will be a formal recruitment process later in the year about permanent appointments, but that has certainly strengthened the organisational capacity. We've supported the sector. We've tried to come up with guidance on topical issues, crypto assets, also a hot topic around advocacy in relation to the voice to Parliament. There's been, I hope you might have felt, there's been a greater period of sector engagement and consultation. I did the other day add up how many conference presentations I'd done in my first 6 months, and bear in mind some of that period was December, January, and I have done 14 conference presentations. We've done media on safe giving after the terrible, terrible earthquakes. We've done consulting about related party transactions and tried to make sure that the questions we've included now on the annual information statement are done in as user-friendly way as possible. We've issued a redrafted Commissioner interpretation statement on health promotion charities. What I will say is that the PBI one, the hot topic, will be out by the end of August. I also want to mention a role that you don't often perhaps see us playing, but that's the role within government. So the legal and policy team, I think, have done more than 10 submissions in this period of time. So we've commented on things like accounting standards, privacy law, and we put in a very substantive submission to the Productivity Commission. I've also met individually with every state and territory regulator, with overseas regulators, with important Commonwealth bodies like obviously the ATO, with ORIC, and that's been quite significant. You'll be very excited to know that yesterday we launched our corporate plan, and I know that you will read it because you are a like-minded audience, suitably, nerdily interested in the ACNC. If I could just pull a couple of points out from that when I sort of looking forward now. The most important thing we need to do is to continue to support public trust and confidence. And as the staff well know, whenever I get to one of those tricky decisions, that is my North Star. What is this decision going to have an impact when it comes to public trust and confidence? It's the best, and the best way we can do it, and the best way we're mandated to do it under our Act, is to ensure that the integrity of our register is of the highest order. And every single member of the ACNC staff, directly or indirectly, contribute to that goal. We'll also continue to focus on supporting charities to understand their obligations and their capacity to meet the governance standards, which is very much in the public interest. And in this work, we will continue to look at the issues the sector face so we understand what's happening in the sector and how best to support the sector when at times there's issues of rising demand in client services as well as increases in costs for organisations trying to deliver those services. The issues, and we'll touch on that in the next panel, issues like cyber security, declining volunteer numbers, workforce, supply issues, just to name a few. And the importance of days like this is we also get to hear from you about other issues that are of concern. And lastly, one of the main priorities is just to focus on our data and to use that to inform the public about the impact of this sector and to also support government in making policy decisions and for you to use to slice and dice in the way that's going to most help you get your message out. And I think using the data to increase awareness of the amazing contribution of the sector, the contribution that goes well behind those numbers that I pulled at the start, I think is really an important part of the work that we do. So I plan on keeping to learning from my Commonwealth, international and state and territory colleagues. I'm looking forward to the opportunities to reduce red tape and, of course, the implementation of my favourite policy announcement in recent times, the nationally consistent fundraising principles. And I was really pleased. We had a great meeting with state and territory colleagues yesterday, and I'm sure we'll build on that, and we're very keen to play our role. So I wanted to keep it short and sweet because it's a really big day ahead. So thank you for coming today, and I hope you'll find it's an informative day. Now I get the great privilege of introducing the Honourable Dr. Andrew Leigh, Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities, Treasury, and also the Assistant Minister for Employment. Given the length of time that you as Minister have held the charities portfolio and the statistics I have just announced or reiterated about employment, I did wonder if I could cheekily change the order of these portfolios so charity was first and employment was second. But I am a regulator, so I don't like to break the rules. But thank you, Minister.
Well, Sue, thank you very much for that generous introduction. I will speak to the Prime Minister as to whether perhaps portfolios should be alphabetical, which would give you your wish there. Can I too acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation on whose lands we're gathered today, acknowledge any Indigenous people present in the room, and commit myself as a member of the Albanese Government to the implementation in full of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, including a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament. Sue, I think your address there has illustrated what everyone in the room feels, just how delighted we are and how proud we are of what you've done in nearly a year in the job. Your 100% attendance record at Regulator Day really does speak to your deep understanding, your passion for the sector, and your Twitter handle as NFP Nerd, I think, sums up those qualities that have benefited the sector, but all Australians more broadly. And it's all Australians who benefit when the charity sector is strong. Charities are out there providing assistance during natural disasters. They're out there improving our environment. Charities are working to create a thriving arts sector and to tell Australian stories. Charities are helping those who are down on their luck and providing emotional support to those who are going through a tough time. In a context in which Australians have been less inclined to join, to participate, to volunteer and to give, a civic renaissance really is fundamental to who we are as Australians. Countries which have a rich tapestry of social ties tend to have economies that work better because commerce is more efficient when it can be done with a handshake with a trusted partner. Countries in which community networks are strong tend to be healthier because a mate's more likely to tell you, maybe you should go to the doctor and get that checked out, or to provide the social sustenance that people need when they're a bit down. I remember meeting one bloke when I was out on a street corner stall who told me that he thought he probably wouldn't still be with us if his cricket club hadn't rallied around and looked after him when he was going through a bout of depression. We know too that community groups are enormously important to living a good life. When you sum up a life at one of those funerals you go to for somebody who has passed away in their 80s or 90s, very rarely does the eulogy talk about how much they earned or what awards they got. Much more commonly, it's about what they gave back to the community, and very often it's how they made a difference through the charity sector. So what you do ripples out to affect all 26 million Australians. My passion for the charity sector goes back to 2013 when I was fortunate enough to be appointed in this portfolio when Labor went into opposition, and I was thrilled to be appointed as the Minister after the election last year. We've set about holding a set of charity town halls across the country in every capital city last year, and we went back again a couple of weeks ago to Perth, to Brisbane, to Devonport and to Adelaide. It's just so important to be out there hearing those charity stories and to understand the challenges and the opportunities that our community sector faces. We've set up a review of philanthropy aimed at doubling philanthropy by 2030, and Julian Christian provided an update to Clans yesterday. Incidentally, I wanted to thank those of you who've been at Clans yesterday and Regulators Day today. Two institutions, both terribly named, both absolutely important, pairing together like Tom and Jerry, Batman and Robin, ice cream and chocolate sauce, meat pie and sauce. And so thank you for those of you who've doubled up for the double day. We've worked on fixing fundraising. I want to acknowledge the state and territory officials, modestly sitting in the back left corner of the room, who are doing the important work of now implementing those harmonised charitable fundraising principles that state and territory treasurers agreed to in February. Getting that done will be so important for the charitable sector. We're moving through a new hybrid model of community foundations. And we're ensuring too that the space for advocacy isn't unduly closed off. I've been making clear that the Australian government welcomes informed charitable voices when it comes to putting in place law reform. We want to hear from community legal centres when we're updating the laws. We want to hear from social service charities when we're thinking about laws affecting poverty and disadvantaged. We want to hear from environmental charities when we're thinking about recasting the next set of charitable laws. I have a podcast in which I chat to interesting people every couple of weeks, and I had on a man called Michael Branowski from the Blue Dragon Foundation, which works with at-risk kids in Vietnam. He was telling me how their initial work was around helping kids on the street, but then they realised that one of their challenges for helping boys at risk was the way in which Vietnam's sexual assault laws were written prevented them prosecuting people who attacked boys. And so Blue Dragon used their experience on the street, and even although Michael's an Aussie, he was able, through that experience of working through street kids, to be an advocate for law change. And it's just yet another example as to how the informed voices of working with a local community translate into effective policy advocacy. And we as a government welcome that. And finally, I wanted to talk about an important process which we began with an open call for nominations to serve on the ACNC Advisory Board. We believe that having an ACNC Advisory Board which is able to assist the Commissioner is critical for the sector. We are firmly committed to an open and transparent process, which is why we didn't do it in a smoke-filled back room, not only because none of us don't smoke, but also because getting that openness is fundamental to who we are. We received more than 200 nominations for the 8 positions on the ACNC Advisory Board, and we're aware that in choosing that board there were many people of talent who could effectively have served on the board who we weren't able to accommodate. What we did in forming a board was to form an advisory board which comprises majority women, which has First Nations and non-English speaking background representation, which has representation from across the country. We aim to provide a board who not only were talented individually, but also who collectively could assist the Charity Commission, and particularly the Charity Commissioner, in taking the organisation forward. And I'm pleased today to be able to announce those 8 people who will be serving on the board. The first is Miles McGregor-Lowndes, Professor Emeritus at the Queensland University of Technology, former Director of the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Not-for-Profit Studies, who has over 40 years of expertise and brings a great deal of wisdom to the board. Second is Rosina Lauria, who has worked as currently she's the CEO of Sydney Multicultural Community Services, but has worked for over 40 years in different areas of welfare management and community development, particularly assisting migrants. The third is Sarah Harrop, who is currently is the former CEO of Food Bank Queensland and has worked with Jabiru Community Services and has over 15 years in leadership roles in charities and not-for-profits. Fourth is Ian Ham, who is the Chair of the First Nations Foundation, Board Member of Aboriginal Housing Victoria, Chair of the Koori Housing Trust and Chair of the Aboriginal Advisory Committee of the National Trust of Australia. Ian is a strong advocate of getting more First Nations people on Australian boards and certainly lives that in his own work and will provide an important conduit to a range of other organisations. Then we have David Crosby, the CEO of the Community Council of Australia. David has worked extensively in the charity sector, has been a key figure arguing for the space for charities to be able to advocate. He's somebody who has previously served on the ACNC Advisory Board and therefore provides that link back to the past board and again the wisdom that comes with that. Then we have Anna Bakic, the former CEO of the Community Industry Group, the peak body for the community sector in southern New South Wales. She's got experience in the New South Wales Council of Social Service, extensive experience in the charities and not-for-profit sector and their regulatory frameworks. Deputy Chair of the ACNC Advisory Board will be Heather Watson, who currently serves on the board and is also the Chair of Uniting New South Wales ACT, the Epic Good Foundation and Director of Australian Regional and Remote Community Services. Heather Watson has served on the ACNC Advisory Board since November 2017. And as you may have figured out from my Freudian slip just now, the chair will be Sarah Davies, the CEO of the Alana and Madeline Foundation, former CEO of Philanthropy Australia, Reach Foundation and the Australian Communities Foundation. I can't think of anybody better than Sarah Davies to be leading the ACNC Advisory Board. Sarah, I might ask if you can stand up. We can put our hands together for you. And Sarah, I think I've pretty much guaranteed that everyone with a new idea for the ACNC will make a beeline for you at the coffee queue, and your inbox will be full by the end of today of fresh ideas of things you can pursue. Again, these are just 8 of the extraordinary people across the community sector. We well know that we could have filled multiple advisory boards through the process, but we believe that this group of people, majority women, First Nations and called representatives, provides a representative body for modern Australia and for the Australian charity and community sector. So I'm very proud to be announcing them today and looking forward very much over the coming years to working with them and with you as the charity sector and the ACNC as the peak regulator. Thanks very much.